So we got a lot to get into with John McMullen as we do each and every day on the Sports Bash. Josh Hennig, Deshaun Hendricks, Hunter Brody filling in for Mike Gill on a Tuesday. John, you were telling me that your highlight of your day was a service dog.
Yes, it was. They let fans in. I was just telling you, and they're very excited, and understandably so, because they get to see their favorite players, whether it's Carson Wentz or Deshaun Jackson or Zach Ertz or even some of the stars that come in. Julie Ertz, Hugh Douglas was there yesterday. John Fox was there today. The service dog was the most exciting part for me.
Well, because you see all those other guys all the time, so.
Exactly. So it gets kind of boring. So I was pretty excited to see a cute dog.
Well, John, maybe not too cute was basically Andre Dillard again, getting emotional, a little more, scuff and tough with guys today. I believe it was Sharif Miller, correct?
Yeah, it was. And I would say this was more of Sharif starting things than Andre. And yesterday was a little bit of give and take. I mean, yesterday was different because it was a 10-10-10 practice, and that's scaled back, and there's no pads, and you're not supposed to be going full bore, and he kind of ran over Jonathan Cyprien. Then it was pretty testy throughout with him and Derek Barnett. So I think it was one of those things where Doug and Howie Roseman took him off to the side after practice and trying to teach him that this is a different environment and everything's new for rookies. And even though you talked about training camp, today is officially the last day, and it's not like it's not like it used to be, where there were 2-a-days and it was a terrible grind. But this is a new generation, and for this generation that's used to doing things a certain way, it's still a grind, and it's still a grind for a rookie to have to go through that every single day. And maybe it just got to Andre. But second straight day, he did not talk to the media, so he's going to have to address it at some point. We'll see when that happens. But I will say on the field, and that's what Doug said, the guy's been great. I mean, by and large, he's a natural pass protector, wasn't asked to run block in college. That's still a work in progress, but looks like he's going to be a really good player.
Yeah, John, I liked him a lot at Washington State. And for me, when I see what's been going on this week, I take the position, you tell me what you think of this, I feel like with Dillard, I'm glad that he has some emotion, some passion, some aggression, because I feel like at least if you are passionate, it's easier to get a guy to dial that down than ask a guy to pick up the energy, because some guys, they just don't have the energy at all. So I'd rather Dillard be a little emotional than not have any emotion at all.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it both ways. There's some good to it. There's some bad. You'll just have to see how it shakes out. I mean, some people do play the game and have a controlled emotion and can do it, and some people can't. And we see it with constant personal fouls. I mean, one of the reasons you have to look at a guy like Andrew Sendejo and what he does on the field, he's got a reputation. I mean, you're going to see some 15-yard penalties when he's on the field. That's just the way it is, because it's manifested itself over the years. And that's the kind of stuff you have to keep an eye on, because if you start to get a reputation, and sometimes it's unfair, but that kind of stuff exists.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. What do you think his role will be this season with so many offensive weapons? I know that there's a spot for him in the red zone, but any news out there?
Well, it's a very deep team at receiver. I mean, and it's Arcega-Whiteside now. They switched it up on us.
Oh, they did it again? They keep changing it on me.
They do. They change it on all of us. We're all calling them Arcega. Now all of a sudden it's Arcega. But anyway, either way, however he wants it pronounced this week, he's a rookie, and he's coming into a team that has Alshon Jeffrey and Deshaun Jackson and Nelson Aguilar. So I often point to last season. And you look at Jordan Matthews, who was the fourth receiver, and he had a role, but it's not going to be a significant role, probably 20, 25% of the snaps, maybe even less, because the Eagles project to play a lot of 12 personnel, 2 tight ends with Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert. So I don't think, barring injury, there's going to be a ton of playing time for JJ early. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not a reflection on him. I think he's everything the Eagles thought he was. He's got tremendous contested catch ability. That's what he was great at Stanford, the back shoulder fades. In a lot of ways, he's like Alshon Jeffrey, just a younger version. I think that's where people project him down the road as sort of the replacement. Because remember, Alshon makes a lot of money, and you have to start thinking about cap issues down the road. And maybe that's how you sort of save a little bit of money. But this year's about going for the Super Bowl. And he's going to be started out slowly because the Eagles have significant depth at the position.
John, we've talked a lot today about Dak Prescott and the contract situation with the Dallas Cowboys. And then it kind of turned into Dak versus Wentz, which is always the hot debate. They're going to be linked probably for the rest of their careers because they were in the same class. They're in the same division. Where do you stand? Not obviously who's the better quarterback, but do you see Dak's stance of what he wants and what he's demanding and wanting to be paid more off of Wentz? Because even though I believe that Wentz is the better quarterback, if you look at the numbers, Dak is 3-1 against Wentz. He does have a better, whatever the case may be. Like, where do you stand in this whole Dak versus Carson?
Well, quarterback wins aren't a stat, number one. Carson's a better quarterback than Dak Prescott, but that doesn't mean Dak isn't a good quarterback. Contracts are about timing and circumstance in this league, and it doesn't mean you're the best player you're at your position if you're the highest paid. It means you're up. That's what it means. And Dak is trying to take advantage of a situation, and he should be. And he should be asking for as much money as you can get. That's what this is about. You have a very short shelf life to make a lot of money in this league. And that's been one of the problems the Cowboys have had, not just with Dak Prescott, but also Ezekiel Elliott. Less so Amari Cooper because they just got him. But this is an organization going back years and years and years. And Joe Banner always talks about this. They always wait. If you wait, you're going to spend more money. The smart teams, and the Eagles are in that category, they seize the opportunity. People don't understand this, but the Eagles got an extremely team-friendly deal with Carson Wentz because they acted early. By waiting, now the Cowboys have a lesser quarterback that they're probably going to have to pay more because that's just the way it works. The bar keeps getting risen, and then the next quarterback behind Dak Prescott will be up, and eventually Patrick Mahomes will be up, and he'll break every record, and then the cycle starts again.
John McMullen on Twitter at JF McMullen, football at 4 here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig, Deshaun Hendricks, Hunter Brody filling in for Mike Gill here on the Sports Bash. You know, John, speaking of the quarterbacks, you know, when you look at the whole, discussion about the timing of these contracts, I always wonder back to something that you have said for the last few years. And that is, you have said numerous times here on 97.3 ESPN about the fact that there are times that guys are not always educated properly by the Players Association and by their agents. And I understand going into a negotiation, trying to get the most money you can. Look, these guys have a small window to make the money. I hope they make all the money they can, because once their career is done, they're done. The league's done with them. But, John, at what point does a guy like Dak not maybe understand or maybe isn't informed enough with the fact that you have a Cowboys team that has to pay him and Ezekiel Elliott, and they have to pay Amari Cooper, and you got Zach Miller's contract coming up. You have all these guys in a few years. Leighton Vander Esch going to get paid. Smith, the linebackers, get paid. The Cowboys going to have a lot of guys they're going to have to pay. And at what point does the agent have to explain to the player, like, look, this is a realistic expectation versus maybe asking for more than you're going to get in the end?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult from an individual player perspective. I generally say that when I'm talking about collective bargaining and the better education process of that. They have to understand to the players who are saying, we don't like Roger Goodell and how he handles personal conduct punishment. Well, 10 people, that might affect 10 people in the negative way over the length of the CBA, literally. And there's 1,700 players in this league. So you're not going to strike over that. And things of that nature, marijuana testing. In the large scheme of things, the far more important aspect from the player's perspective is the revenue split. And that's what they need to be better educated on. From a personal standpoint, look, we've seen Tom Brady for years take a little bit less money. Certain quarterbacks do, certain quarterbacks don't. The Cowboys are in an interesting situation because the engine of their team, if we're going to use a Jim Schwartz description, is Ezekiel Elliott. And he plays a position that is not valued. And if he's gone, you've already seen it. When he's been suspended in the past, when he's been off the field in the past, that team stinks. And when he's on the field, they're really good. So they're in a weird conundrum going to a second contract with a running back, and he's the outlier, Ezekiel Elliott. He is that important to their team that he deserves big-time money, even though the position is devalued. And they know that. They know he's the engine, but the quarterback is the value position. As you guys mentioned, Dak has produced, but he's produced because he's had Zeke. And I think the Cowboys know that, but they're in a difficult situation because at some point, especially if you're a running back who touches it and gets as much mileage on him as Zeke Elliott, when the decline starts, it's going to be significant and it's going to be quick. So that's sort of the problems that they're dealing with, and it's a difficult problem.
John, I'm going to switch it to the Eagles' defense. I know this isn't the most valued position in the world, but is there any concern at linebacker with Nigel Bradham not being fully ready yet, Grugier Hill going down? Is it possible that we start the season with Zach Brown and someone like L.J. Fort? And if it is that something we should be comfortable with?
Well, I don't know if comfortable is the right term. It's clearly one of the biggest question marks on the defensive side of the ball. Nigel, the goal is week one. I mean, there's a lot of guys that Fletcher Cox has not practiced yet, and he's not on the field. The goal is week one. The Eagles shut down Lane Johnson and Dallas Goedert. You're not going to see them the rest of the preseason. The goal is week one. Ronald Darby, the goal is week one. Nigel's in that category. Now, he looks fine. I see him in the locker room all the time. I think he could probably play today if he had to. So I think he'll be out there. So I don't think you have to be worried at that aspect of it. And until Camus gets back, he's going to be the other nickel linebacker. I think you're going to see a lot of big nickel. And that means three safeties on the field, and essentially Malcolm's going to be playing that second linebacker position. And Andrew Sendeo and Rodney McLeod are going to be the safeties. So that's the way I think Jim Schwartz is going to cobble it together. Zach Brown will be here, but he's a run stuffer in a league that doesn't value run stuffers. Sort of the opposite. Linebackers are like running backs on the defensive side of the ball. They're devalued. So we've seen in the past when Jordan Hicks got hurt, that's when Malcolm starts moving all over the place. And that's why I always say, while Fletcher Cox is the best defensive player on this team, Malcolm is the most important because he played every single position on the back end last season. He probably will again this season.
John, when you talk about that back end and the weakness of the Philadelphia Eagles defense the last couple of years, even the year that they won the Super Bowl, because even though it was overshadowed by the great pass rush, has been their secondary. I've argued that it's been one of their strengths going into this year when you got guys like Avonte Maddox, Jalen Mills when he gets back, Ronald Darby, etc. Are there some guys that are ready after what you've seen this camp to really make a contribution this year? Sidney Jones, another guy.
Well, I think they're going to be better. I think we do need to pump the brakes a little bit on Avante and Sidney Jones. They're good young players, but they haven't proven they're star players yet. But it's a lot better than it was last year when they had all the injuries and they had to muddle through. Ronald, as I mentioned, is back on 7-on-7s. He looks very good. As soon as he's cleared, he's the starting right corner. My guess is Sidney will be the starting left corner, and Avante will be the slot corner. And I think there's potential there to have a good unit. I don't know if it's going to be great. There's still some issues with run support from Sidney's perspective. Avante hasn't played a ton of football, and I think we kind of sometimes overvalue how well he played last season. He played really well at corner. He struggled a lot at safety, but that's not his natural position. A slot corner is his natural position. So I think there's potential, and they certainly look better. But those who are putting Rasul Douglas and Crevan LeBlanc on pedestals, I say to those people, come on, stop it. They're not Patrick Peterson.
John McMullen joining us, the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Check out all of his work at 97.3ESPN.com, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, as he covers the Eagles each and every day for us here at 97.3. A little housekeeping news today, John, was the Eagles waived Blake Countess with the injury settlement. Aziz Chatou is back with the Eagles. But the more interesting story, I want to get your perspective on this. And
avoiding the easy Shaitu mistake.
I'm trying. I'm really trying over here. I want to ask you about this story about Brett Toth, because I find it interesting that if he is allowed to come play for the Eagles, what does that do for the Eagles' depth and for the offensive line with a team that, there's nothing really concrete about the backup lineman at this point. We know Vaitai, they've been trying him out at right guard. Mailata, he's still probably a couple of years away from being a consistent contributor in the NFL. So where would Toth fit in to the Eagles, especially considering of how good of a player he was in college?
Yeah, I think that took everybody by surprise because the Eagles have so much talent at offensive tackle, and it starts with Jason Peterson, Lane Johnson, but also Andre Dillard and Jordan Mailata, but Halapula, Vaitai, Matt Pryor really tackle are their natural positions as well, even though they've been playing guard. And Vaitai's played a ton of tackle, won a Super Bowl playing tackle. So they're the deepest team in football at offensive tackle. So I think this is just one of those things where Jeff Stoutland likes him. He's athletic. And remember, they're not adverse to playing guys inside as well who are tall. Generally, we look at guys who are 6'5", 6'6", and say, well, he can't play guard. Well, Brandon Brooks is 6'5". He's a Pro Bowl guard. Vaitai's 6'6", they moved him to guard. Pryor's 6'6" or 6'7", they moved him to guard. So they're not adverse to it. So I think there's some position versatility there. He's athletic. That's what Stoutland likes. And you kind of roll the dice and see where it fits in. Brandon Brooks is getting evaluated tomorrow, and he hopes to be cleared for teamwork. I think once that happens, once he's cleared, once he's back at right guard, I think then Howie's on the phone. And I think he's calling, and there are a lot of them, he's calling these offensive line deficient teams and saying Vaitai's up for grabs and see what he can get. And I think he's going to get more than people realize.
What would you expect the Eagles to be asking? Would it just be draft picks? Would it possibly be a player in return? Where do you think the Eagles would try to focus the return value if they were to trade a guy like Vaitai?
Well, I think it would be draft choice related. I think generally when you see player for player trades, not always. There's been speculation of Jadeveon Clowney for Trent Williams, things like that. and we saw Sam Bradford get traded. So there are some bigger names occasionally that go, but generally it's lower levels, as what you just saw Eli Howard for Ryan Bates and something of that nature. I think if you trade a Vitae who would project to be a starter where he's going, wherever that might be, I think you'd be looking for a draft choice. And it would start probably at a 5 conditional to get up to a 4. And I think they would hope to get a 4 conditional to try to get up to 3 if you start 16 games or something of that nature.
John, before I let you go, I got to ask your opinion about the biggest news of the day, John, that was totally not surprising to anyone. Doug Marrone announced today that Nick Foles will not start on Thursday.
Yeah, well, and I joke to people who think, as I mentioned, Lane Johnson has been shut down.
Right.
Jason Peters, preseason, he's not going to play. Jason Kelsey's been dealing with that knee injury that's been nagging. He's had a couple veteran days. I can't imagine he's going to play. And Brandon Brooks is still not cleared. So if you think Doug Peterson was putting Carson Wentz behind the second-team offensive line, and, oh, by the way, in Jacksonville, which the only good that could come of that would be, getting out healthy. But can you imagine if Nick did start and played well, and then all these people would be looking at preseason football and saying, Nick's better than Carson Wentz? No good of it could come from the Eagles.
John, I'll give you one more scenario. What if Vitae plays well and the Eagles eventually trade Vitae to the Jags?
Hey, that could happen. They're one of those teams.
They're
one of those offensive line deprived teams, and there are a ton of them. The Eagles are so deep on the offensive line, and if you add Top to that, I don't want to let's be honest. That's a guy who didn't get drafted, and it's not like he's a star player, but it's somebody they obviously feel has potential. They have so many offensive linemen, and there are so many teams in this league that can't even field 5. And for a decent starting offensive line, they're going to be able to move somebody.
Yeah. All right, John, every day at 4, you join us, and we appreciate all the insights as the Eagles continue forward with the preseason. Of course, people can hear all the Eagles preseason action again this Thursday night, Jags and Eagles, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Check out all of John's work at 97.3ESPN.com, and you better be following John on Twitter at JF McMullen, where John has a very candid photo of JJ Arcega-Whiteside with the one and only Mike Quick. You only get that from John McMullen's Twitter.
Yeah, how about that? And you get to see Giuseppe, the service dog, as well.
John McMullen, full service on Twitter at JF McMullen. John, talk to you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, guys.